Hello there, and welcome to Haydn Behind the Music Stand. I'm your host, Patty Ryan, and with me is Matt Linaman, who is a cellist and content creator based in San Francisco. He has his own private teaching studio and also coaches chamber music at the San Francisco Conservatory of Music Prep College program. And we'll be talking about mindfulness and meditation. Welcome, Matt. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me here, Patty.
Yay.
I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. Well, I met you, I should say, when I entered the San Francisco Conservatory of Music for my first master's in Jean-Michel Fontenot's studio. And you were just sitting there in your bachelor's degree in the studio already. And I remember you playing for the first time, and I was like super intimidated because I was like, oh my God, he's so good. Oh my God, he's so prepared. And I think you played like Shlomo, or you were playing Shlomo.
Uh-huh.
Did you win the competition at that point, or did you?
I think I won with Shlomo that year.
Yeah. So I think you were prepped and ready to perform. And so everything was just tight and perfect, and expression was so great. And anyway, I was always like, oh my God, Matt is so good.
Well, thank you. That's very nice.
Well, and one of the things I kind of remember, and this might be a slight funny story about you, is I visualize myself doing this sometimes too, even if I don't act it out. But in preparation for this big performance, so when I mean the competition, I mean you won the concerto competition at the San Francisco Conservatory of Music, which is an annual competition. They segment it with different instruments. So woodwinds or brass or upper strings and lower strings had different concerto competitions. So you're practicing performing in our studio classes. And I remember you would jump and land really stiffly and firmly. And you'd always say, I have to feel grounded. I have to feel grounded. And so I remember you would just jump, and it was a very method acting kind of moment. And I really liked it. That's where I say, like, I sometimes envision myself doing that if I'm starting to feel a little nervous.
Oh, that is so funny. I don't remember that at all. Isn't that funny? I do remember one time taking my shoes off in studio class, probably for a similar thing, like trying to feel like connected to the floor. And then realizing after, like, oh, I'm never going to do that again because I'm sure my feet stink. So,
no! Well,
so I decided to never do that again.
Well, never say never. I mean, the famous violinist Patricia Kopachinskaya. I'm sorry, my nickname, because it's so hard for me to pronounce her name, I just call her Patty K for short. But she performs, without her shoes on.
Yeah, right. I love her, and I think her style is so her and so unique, and like all the way down to her not wearing shoes. It's like she just doesn't care. I mean, that's what it looks like, at least. And she plays in really her own style. I love it. It's really inspiring.
I love it. Yeah, I've seen her perform with the St. Paul Chamber Orchestra many times because she used to be one of the resident artists with them. Oh. And this might be a story for another day, but she did one of the most phenomenal performance as an art show that I've ever seen, where it was her final performance with her tenure at SPCO, and the theme of it was farewell, and she ended it with the Farewell Symphony. Of course, every musician, when they were leaving the stage, because that's what's instructed in Haydn's symphony, is to leave the stage, they would pick up a rose that was placed on their stand and put it in front where the conductor would be sitting. And at the end, so there's just all these roses that are being piled on top of one another, and she grabs a gas mask and puts it over her face and just stands there with her she puts her violin down, I think, too, and just stands there. It was, to me, I'm still getting chills just remembering
me too.
Yeah, because it was, for her, it was symbolism of what we as humans are doing to our environment, and that we are saying farewell if we're not going to take care of ours. Yeah. Anyway, it's very, very powerful.
Ooh,
I know. Yeah. And everyone, the audience was just roaring. Like everyone, sorry, I'm still getting chills.
One of those moments. Oh my gosh, I know.
It was so good. It was so potent. And anyway, she's amazing. So it's just, even if you don't like her playing or her style of playing, I think you have to respect what her message is through classical music, because it's not just like, oh, she walks up there and performs a concerto and leaves. It's like she really curates a concert. But anyway, we're not talking about her today. We're talking about grounded feet.
It's sometimes hard to think back to conservatory. It all starts to feel like a blur sometimes.
Yes.
But I have two sort of memories. One is just seeing you working so hard all the time. And I really respected you for that. I feel like you always tried to really understand what teachers were saying. And you always gave such great comments in studio class and took comments so well. And I could always tell you just put your heart into everything. Aww. And I always respected that.
Oh,
yeah.
I didn't know I did that.
I thought that was such a great, yeah, you totally did. Yeah. So I always respected that. I was inspired by that, honestly.
Oh, thanks, Matt.
Yeah.
So can you tell me about Bao?
So a bao is the bunny that I share with my roommate. My roommate got a bunny during quarantine after everything. We couldn't see friends and stuff. So at first I was really against the idea. I wasn't sure about pets. I mean, of course I love cats and dogs,
Yeah.
but I was like, aren't bunnies like smelly and aren't people allergic to them? And aren't they like kind of a rodent? I sort of had to like so we finally found some agreements. We sort of agreed upon the ways we could have the bunny here. And so one day I come home and there's a bunny in the house.
Wait, so she didn't like prep you for its arrival?
Yep, she didn't. I told her that she could get the bunny. Like we agreed she could get the bunny, but I didn't know when it was going to happen.
Got it.
And it turned out that someone had this bunny in Berkeley and had to move suddenly, I think just because of the pandemic. So the bunny was already like a year old. It had already been trained and potty trained, which I didn't even know you could do. So she had to just jump on it and drive to Berkeley in the middle of the day and pick up this bunny. So we came home and pretty much immediately, I think I fell in love with it. It's so cute.
They're so
soft.
It's
a smallish rabbit. They're so soft. Oh my goodness. It's so soft. And he's really friendly. He can be skittish a little bit. He was a little skittish at first, but now he's totally warmed up to us and he'll let you just pet him. And now having a bunny, every time I see the little bow, I go, oh, I feel this, like my heart swells, Like, I love him.
Yeah.
And it makes me so happy. I can have like a hard day, rough day, or be stressed out or anxious about something. And I'll open the fridge in the kitchen and he'll hear the fridge open and he'll run into the kitchen.
Yeah.
And he's just so cute. It's like, how can you not soften up?
Yeah.
So that's really changed my relationship to animals. I don't want to come off like a psychopath, like that I don't like animals.
No, not at all. Not at all. They make very good companions though. Yeah.
They make very good companions. And I think that outpouring of love to him was a nice surprise, kind of. I didn't quite expect that I would feel that way. And it's been really nice, I have to say.
All right, Matt, are you ready for some Spitfire questions?
I'm ready.
Okay. Mahler or Bruckner?
Mahler.
Debussy or Ravel?
If I had to choose one composer for life, it would probably be Debussy, I think.
Yeah.
Out of those two, Debussy or Ravel. Yeah.
Okay. Cats or dogs?
Right now in my life, dogs.
Okay. Appetizer or dessert?
Appetizers.
Sparkling or still water?
Sparkling.
Alternative universe musical instrument. This is the fan favorite question.
Probably the flute. I think the flute is beautiful.
Wow. Well, that lines up with Debussy, but also
that's true.
But also I was wondering if it was in reaction to the number of times people have said to you, don't you wish you played the flute? Like
when I'm carrying my big cello.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
maybe piano too, but I've always wanted to play the flute. I think it's a beautiful instrument.
It is. It certainly is. Early bird or night owl?
Night owl, for sure.
Pandemic guilty pleasure?
Watching more movies, probably.
Okay. Favorite professor shout out?
Gotta go with Dr. Homan.
Okay. That is, he is a popular one with the San Francisco crowd. And also, I guess, specifically undergrad, because I never studied with him.
Right. He did a lot of the core humanities for undergrad. Just amazing, inspiring teacher, like timed his lectures with some of the greatest works of classical music and really great lecturer. You can't forget his lectures, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, other ones are like Mark Sokol,
yes.
chamber music coaching. And
I mean, we've talked about Mark a lot, but yes, we miss you, Mark. Most inspired musical hero of any genre?
Beyonce.
Yes, the queen herself.
The queen.
She is amazing.
She is amazing. I mean,
she can't do
amazing
wrong.
Musician. No, she can't do wrong. I think she has an amazing voice. I think she's an incredible musician. I think there's so much detail in her vocal recordings, so much amazing phrasing.
Yes.
Like incredible phrasing, and she's so good with words. Like she sings words so well. And then she has just like a gorgeous voice. And then the whole production value of her albums and then the creative direction of all her videos and everything. I think she is the queen. I love her.
Most transformative performance experience?
Playing the Brahms Requiem in my senior year of high school.
Oh.
There was a moment, it was the cello had a solo. I was playing the solo, and then the soloist, the soprano or something, was singing, and there was like only one other instrument playing. It was very pared down section, and I think the conductor started crying and I started crying. It was just like so beautiful. Like something about it just sort of transcended like normal life, and I'll never forget it. And that was the moment I decided to be a cellist.
Oh, well, there we go. How perfect to
Yeah.
tie into a future conversation. But yeah, I mean, I love those moments where it feels like everything's lifted, but it's like when somehow the stars align like that and you can just enjoy that feeling of being lifted out of your troubles and misery.
That's such a good way to say it. Yeah, it felt like the world just like closed in around us in a
Yeah.
good way. Like when we
Yeah.
just sort of were like in this moment together, and
Interact.
the music was so powerful and
Of course,
beautiful.
it's
And
Brahms. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That's awesome. Desert island piece of any genre?
Beethoven String Quartet. I think it's like number 12, the one in E flat major, 127.
That's a great one. That's a hard piece to play, but it's a great one.
I've never played it.
Oh, okay. Oh, but you'll be
I've never
fine.
played it,
You'll be fine.
but I love it. Maybe the harp
Yeah.
quartet too, Opus 74. I
Oh,
think,
the
right?
E flats. Yeah, you can't go. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's my key, I guess.
Yeah, no, I love that key too. So, well, Matt, you made it through the Spitfire questions. Congratulations.
Woohoo!
So, can you walk me through your musical origin story? When did you discover music or cello? And then I guess you told us when you decided to become a professional musician was in that transformative performance moment. But after that, can you walk us through the steps of you becoming a professional musician that you are today?
Yeah, well, I grew up in Nevada. The public elementary school had a music program. And in 5th grade, they brought like a truckload of violins, and they brought a violin teacher in, and we all got to learn violin for about 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks. And that was because the following year, you could then choose if you were to be an orchestra or choir or band.
Okay.
And so I think we also got to play the recorder, and then we also took some like choir. So we had experience, and then so we could choose the following year. And I'll never forget within some point learning violin in those first few weeks. So first it just sort of felt natural, and it just like made sense. Like, and I remember the other kids were trying to like pizzicato, like open D strings, and I was like figuring out how to play stuff with the bow.
Yeah.
And it just like made sense. And I had the weirdest sensation that I don't know if I could put words to it at the time, but the sensation was that I had already done this before.
Whoa!
Like I know, talk about like weird experiences, like, but it felt like I already knew how to do it. And so I fell in love with it right away. Growing up, I was a gymnast for a long time, very serious.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I was a gymnast.
That makes so much sense. Sorry, just because like you're so focused and like you have to know what you're doing before you execute it.
Yes, totally.
Very much like music. Yeah, go on though.
Gymnastics really prepared me a lot for music, I think, in a way that more ways than I realized for a long time. Just the focus and the discipline, but also like the physical movements of it, to be balanced all the time. You have to be choreographed. The more I keep playing cello, the more I feel like I'm not playing cello, but I feel like I'm dancing or something, like with my arms. Like, yeah. So I was a gymnast. I loved it. I was like competing, doing all this stuff. So apparently I came home and told my mom, I want to quit gymnastics because I love music more.
Yeah.
And so I was doing violin. So then in 6th grade, now I'm playing violin in the orchestra. And this kid, Kenny, who he like was like gothic, dressed in all black. He dyed his hair black and had like a foot tall mohawk.
Yes.
In 6th grade, nonetheless.
Yeah, I know.
It's kind of amazing. He had chosen the cello for some reason in this orchestra. And I remember the first day in orchestra, his teacher was tuning his cello.
Yeah.
And it was like laser focused zoom in on that cello. Yeah. And I was like, I have to play that instrument. I have to get a cello. And so somehow we found a cello, and I played both violin and cello for a couple years.
Oh, wow.
And then I think I quit violin in 8th grade. And once I tried cello, then it felt like, oh, right, this feels much more natural for me. And I started to connect with the cello a lot more.
So you turned to the dark side, in other words.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I'm just making a joke, but I mean, I had a very similar feeling too. When I heard the cello, I was like, that is it. That's the sound. And I don't know, out of all the instruments. So anyway, obviously that's why we're cellists, but
right. Yeah. And also like at the period of time, my mom has played piano her whole life, kind of in an amateur sense. I don't even really know if she's taken lessons, but we always had a piano in the house, and she tried to get me in piano lessons. And to be totally honest, I hated it. I think I was 7, 8 years old, and I never liked it. It never spoke to me. And then one day, a few years later, the violin suddenly spoke to me. And so I think it was like the perfect timing as well for me to sort of be ready for that. But yeah, that moment of like, yes, that's it. Like that's the sound.
Yeah.
That was so cool. And then, yeah, so I think my dad found a cello, and then I sort of got the cello on Christmas. So I remember like
Oh.
not like necessarily opening the cello at Christmas, but it was an exciting moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then after that, I think I just kept going. I was taking lessons, and it was going well. And then eventually my teacher finally encouraged me to go to a summer camp. So I started to go to a few summer camps, and I don't know, this is weird to say, but that maybe I was like talented. Because I think where I grew up in Reno, like, I don't know, I just didn't even think about that,
Mm-hmm.
So I started to realize like, oh, I'm picking this up faster than some of these other people. But not only that, I always felt a really strong connection to music. Even growing up playing Suzuki songs, like Book 2 songs, like I loved these songs, and they always had so much emotion to me in them.
Yeah.
And so like, I don't know.
That's so cute. No, I think it's, go on. I just think it's cute. Yeah.
Like I have a memory of playing the scherzo from Book 3 of Suzuki. There's this slow section in the middle that's quite beautiful.
Yes, I know what you're talking about.
I love that section.
Yeah, totally.
And like for the listeners, like Patty's like swaying back and forth singing that. And that's exactly, I remember like just like rocking out to that song at home, and I loved that piece. So thankfully my teacher was very patient with me, because I was not, even though I came from this like disciplined background of music, I did have like my rebellious teenage years, which fortunately I was able to like come back on track after a while. And then I went to Encore, which was this like 6-week long kind of like Meadowmount, these like practice camps kind of, that really helped me see that this was something I really wanted to do. And yeah, so that I at least wanted to take it more seriously. So I came back from that, and a lot of the kids that I met there, they were already at Curtis, and they were like 15, or like these examples of things that I didn't even know were possible.
Yeah.
Kids that were my age that were just playing amazingly, like had incredible technique. So it really opened my eyes to what was possible. And I thought, wow, okay, maybe I could do that too. So the other thing I realized, they were also almost all of them were in some sort of pre-college, like preparatory program.
Sure.
There was one in Cleveland that a lot of these kids were going to, which is where Encore was outside of Cleveland. And I came back home to Reno, and I told my mom, like, oh, maybe I need to go to one of these. And we ended up finding out that the San Francisco Conservatory had a pre-college program. And so eventually I actually came down and auditioned just before my last year of high school. And I got in, and that's not when I first met Jean-Michel, but I started to study with Jean-Michel in pre-college in my senior year of high school.
Mm-hmm.
But even still that year, I think junior year of high school, I got really into biology and anatomy and physiology and got chemistry. I suddenly started like loving all of these science classes. And I was like, oh, maybe I should go into medicine, or like learn, like go to be a doctor or something.
Yeah.
So in senior year of high school, making these college applications, and I was really undecided if I was going to choose to go to a conservatory or to a university.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the universities I was looking at was Michigan, because they had a university, but also a good music program. And the day before college applications were due, I had this concert, and I was playing the Brahms Requiem with this group in Reno. So I was telling Patty about this experience that I was playing, and sort of had this like kind of spiritual experience playing the Brahms Requiem. Wow. And I think later that night, I would have had to go home to decide what applications to send out. And in that moment at that concert, I realized there's nothing else that I know yet that makes me feel this way, and that I know that can do this, that I know that can affect people in this way, such as music. And I have to do music.
Yeah.
I have to do this.
That's
I have to like
wild. That it's like, it was like, I feel like whether anyone believes in any divinity force going out there, but this is like literally when something was placed in your hand, you're like, oh, I've done this before. And then the moment that you had this really important decision, that you had this transformative experience, and wow, that's just nuts. It's wild.
I know.
It was like someone
really
was just pushing you along to say, go down this way, Matt.
I know, absolutely. It felt like that, like someone was sort of like pulling me in this direction. And so I went home, and I didn't apply to Michigan. I just sent the applications to these conservatories. And, I think even after that, I still had some doubt, like, oh, did I make the right choice? But I think after a month or two, once I finally got to the conservatory, I thought, you know what, I could always go back and do medicine if I really wanted to. And then haven't thought of that since. So, yeah.
I mean, because you play so well, like, why would you?
I mean, I'll be honest, that's not totally true. I do sometimes think about other careers. And I think that's important to say, because I feel like there's a little bit of I had those experiences, and all those were very true. But I think there is a bit of a fantasy that it's like an either or that like, if you're a cellist, it's like, or a musician or something, it's like, that's all you can be. And I struggle with that a little bit, of like how much our identities are wrapped up in also what our jobs are.
Yes.
And So like anytime I have considered like looking at other options, I think it's very challenging to manage this relationship and like, well, how would music still be in my life? And you don't really know. And that's scary to think about sometimes. So I just want to say that for the record, just
No,
so that
thank
it's
you.
not like,
Thank you for also kind of reminding me of my own podcast mantra a little bit, because I was like, oh my God, but you're so good. Why would you not do that? But I'm like, no, wait, you're right. Like totally. Like that is wholly what I'm trying to do on the podcast, is like separate the music side from other elements of who we are, and that we are not only a musician and that's all that we can be, right?
yeah.
So it's very important.
Right. You know, I think during the pandemic, I've been very grateful enough to be able to keep teaching. I had a lot of students, so I was able to teach them online, and that's been great. And to be honest, I felt burnt out at many points in the pandemic. And I think it's because the amount of variety that was in probably all of our lives of teaching and performing and rehearsing and seeing friends and like all this stuff, all that variety just, for me, it went very singular into only teaching. So I started to feel burnt out for that. But what reignited me in that a little bit was recognizing where all these parts of life that I get excited about. I still love science. I still love neuroscience, especially. That's sort of what I've gotten very into a couple of years ago. Neuroscience, I think, is related to learning, and then very interested in psychology and movement, like, gymnastics still. And I realized that all of that actually comes through in music and also through teaching. I'll hear myself talking to students about neuroscience or about movement or about mindfulness, which we might talk about later. And I realized, well, teaching actually has all of that in it for me. In a way.
That's beautiful. Sorry, you're inspiring me. But
so that's oh, thanks, Patty.
But no, okay, so you went through the conservatory and you did a bachelor's there. Then what?
Well, oh my gosh, after conservatory life, it's very challenging to navigate. I think the first year was okay. I think I was in a quartet. I was in a cello quartet, which Patty was in. Patty had her own cello quartet too. And we'd won a grant to go on a tour in Europe. It was through the US State Department to do like some music ambassadorship. So we had that like a few months out after graduating. So we kept working together. We were doing gigs and playing concerts and getting ready for the tour. And so I was sort of trying to, pick up some teaching work. I actually got a job at a cafe, which actually was so fun. Yeah, so I worked with the quartet. We ended up going on tour. And then at some point, I found this cello that I fell in love with. Is this a good time to go into it?
Absolutely, yeah. So,
okay, yeah.
Yes, please do. Matt has a very interesting story of how he found his cello.
Yeah, totally. And this is right after I graduated, actually, our teacher, Jean-Michel, reached out to me and said, hey, I just played this cello at this shop in Berkeley called Ifshin's, and it was really beautiful. And I know you were saying you were looking for a bigger instrument, and maybe you should go try this cello. Like I thought of you when I played it. So I thought, okay, but it was way out of my price range, obviously. I mean, I had no price range. I was like happy to get tips at like the coffee shop I was working with. So I went and played it. And at first it was just like, oh, this is just a fun thing to do. But I remember sitting down the first moment and kind of falling in love with the cello, really just being like astonished at this instrument. Gorgeous, gorgeous sound. It felt so nice to play. And I really did fall in love with it, but I didn't take it home. I left it there. Like, no, this is a pipe dream. Yeah. So I went home and I kept ruminating about this cello, like thinking about it and fantasizing about it. And so I went back again and played it again, and then I started talking to some people like, well, what is this? Is this really a pipe dream, or like, is this something we could do? And so I somehow decided that I was going to try to buy this cello, but I had no money. I didn't have any money from my family that I could help to buy it with. So I thought, okay, well, I'm going to try to fundraise this money. So I started an Indiegogo campaign. I started a fundraising campaign, and I played a bunch of concerts. The shop graciously lent me the cello to take it around. And so I was playing all these concerts, and, I would meet one person and they'd say, okay, you can play at my house. So I'd play at their house, and then I would meet someone that they'd invited, and they say, oh, well, we have a piano, you should come play at our house. And slowly it led to like all these house concerts, and I was meeting all these people. And in all of the time, I realized I'm fundraising, and I really don't want this to be about money so much, because it felt like the cello was really, I think for all of us, in a way, our instruments are vehicles of our expression to translate our gifts into the world. And I think that's true, but that's also the lens that I took on this fundraising program, to try to inspire people with music and inspire people with sort of like my vision, is what I was calling it, my vision of like what I wanted to do with music in the world, instead of so much like, hey, can I have $20?
Right.
And that was very difficult to do, because I think if you just ask someone for money and they say no, it's like, okay. But I felt like I was like putting my heart out there, like wearing my heart on my sleeve. And that was terrifying for me. And then also having to like basically ask people for money and feel like worthy of it, like, and not feel like a total imposter and feel like there was like guilt mixed up with it too. Like, do I really deserve this cello?
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of things to sort through. But what happened was the reality of it kept showing me that it was possible, because I kept getting more donations and I kept getting to play more concerts, and I kept meeting new people that would write me checks. And these were small checks. They were like $50, you know.
Right.
And I remember like the first check that I got that was more than $100. I was like, oh my God, this felt like so much money to me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so I was working at this cafe in San Francisco in the Castro. It's called Phil's Coffee.
Mm-hmm.
Woo, woo, great coffee. And I was promoting the concert. So I had a poster of my concert in there, and I was, you know, telling the people about it. And at one point in time, I'd met an amateur pianist, David Clark. He was a real estate agent and loved to fly planes in his spare time. He was also a great pianist. And he came to one of my concerts at the conservatory and heard me give my spiel about my vision and about the cello and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And he reached out after and said, hey, I have some great ideas. I think I can help you on this fundraising process. I think you need this cello. Let's work together. So we started planning some concerts together. And at one point in time, he had a dinner party with some of his friends who also like to fly planes. So one of the people at the party was this guy named Mike Vanny, and he happened to be a regular at Phil's Coffee. So he said, oh, I know Matt. Like, he's made my coffee before. So he starts to hear David talk about me and our project together and the cello. So at this point, I'd raised actually a significant amount of money. By the way, the cello was selling for $125,000.
Right.
And coming out just trying to deal with student loans and figuring out how to pay rent and all this stuff. This was like just a stupid amount of money. I couldn't even fathom that much money. And so at this point in time, I'd actually raised about $20,000.
Yeah, I mean,
which was great. It still felt like I was so far away. And I was really at the point where the fundraising has slowed down. I'd sort of maxed out my network. I wasn't really getting any more donations. And I felt I was so far away from reaching my goal. Mm-hmm. And literally the next day, Mike Vanny walked into the cafe I was working at while I was making his coffee. And he said to me, when you find yourself at the place that you may need a loan, let me know, because I can help you.
Okay.
And because up until this time, I was so young, I was 21, I worked at a cafe, no bank was going to give me a loan.
Right.
In their right mind. They shouldn't have. So suddenly this like solution came.
Fell into your lap. Again, it's like all fate. Like, okay, but go on. Yeah, go on, please. Sorry.
I know, it really was. It's like, what? Like this crazy thing. And that's why, like, you know, this job at this cafe proved so valuable in so many ways. I mean, not that I don't want it to be like that I used them to buy my cello.
No.
I learned so much at this job too, and I met so many great people. And I think the reason this was so impactful because Mike came into the shop right at the time when I was like really feeling desperate. Like I'd had some success with the fundraising, but I still felt I was so far away. So then now I had this offer from Mike, and we talked about it, and he said, well, I'm only willing to lend you 50% of the cello's value. That was the liability he was willing to take on.
Yeah.
So I thought, all right, now I have a goal. I need to raise 50% of this cello's value.
Yeah.
So at the same time, the previous owner and the dealer had taken the cello to try to get it authenticated because it was a beautiful old French cello, but it didn't have any authentication papers.
Right.
So they were trying to get it like authenticated, I think for their benefit and mine. And for whatever reason, they weren't able to get any authentication on it.
Oh, no.
So yeah, so it was a little bit of a bummer at first.
But at the same time, it's a benefit for you when you're fundraising.
Exactly. Yeah. Because they lowered the price.
Yes.
And they lowered the price pretty substantially. And I thought, you know what, this cello is still the same cello. To me, it still means the same thing. And they lowered the price to an amount where it was like, all right, I've raised 20,000. I could raise a little bit more and get to the 50% mark. Yeah. And then I can get this loan. And so that's what I did. So I was able to pull together some last minute fundraising, and I got to email Mike and say, hi, Mike, I have 50%. And then we bought the cello.
It's wild. I just have to stop being speechless. You did what I fear most, which is ask for money from people. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like so many of us have the same things that you were talking about earlier with this, like, am I worthy enough? Like, it's one thing if, you know, you feel like you're wearing your heart on your sleeve, especially when it comes to your vehicle, your vessel of expression. And just, I think what's also beautiful about this story is how your community reached out and helped you, even in the most or smallest way they could. Mm-hmm. But that I mean, obviously it's your cello, but it's also because of the wave of support from people that met you and love you for who you are and want you to succeed and have a beautiful cello life. You know what I mean? Like,
right. And that was like, some people gave me $25, but some people really surprised me with their generosity. Like people I hadn't even met that had just come to the concert because their friend invited them and would write a check for $500 or something, you know, that was like, wow, like that amount of money really makes an impact. And the support of the community is what really kept me going. It was like, even though I'm having all of this fear and doubt and stuff, I'm eternally grateful for that. They were like, nope, keep going. Don't give up. Like, you have to keep going for this. And that was the other element of it too, was that it was fundraising. And like on the outside, it was like, oh, he fundraised and got the cello. But really for me, what was so transformative was having to go through all of the fear and like dealing with the uncertainty of like, well, will I really ever get that? And also just like walking through the imposter syndrome every day, never feeling ready and never feeling unafraid. And I sort of came up with this thing after I like, it's a little bit embarrassing now, but I was like, oh, because I was working on a little bit of a book and I was like, oh, I'm the fearless cellist.
Right.
And the truth is that's not true, because I'm like the most fearful. But what I learned was that I kept waiting for the moment when I would be fearless. And that moment never came.
Right.
Because I realized that I couldn't keep waiting to be fearless. I had to do it in spite of the fear. I had to just keep going in spite of all of the imposter syndrome and not knowing if I was worthy and the guilt and the fear and the uncertainty. Like all of that aside, I had to keep going anyway. And the truth is that never went away. Like that was there until like the last moment.
The moment where you had put pen to paper to sign.
Right. And so I still remember like going to the place, like my heart fluttering, like, oh my God, like is Mike really going to show up? Like all this stuff, you know?
Yes, right.
I had to go through all of that anyway. I had to like just keep going despite the fear and despite all of the feelings.
Yeah. I mean, just so inspiring, and congratulations as well to accomplish that.
Thank you.
Yeah. You also shared the same story on the TED stage, TEDx or TEDx. Right?
Technically, yeah.
How did that happen?
So a good friend of mine, Kristen Namamoto Posner, we were good friends at the time, and one of her good friends is a podcast producer. So I was talking to Kristen, and this was after I'd bought the cello, actually. So I was telling Kristen this story, and at this point, I'd been through it all, and it didn't seem as amazing to me because I think I'd been through it and I had been there the whole time. And I was telling Kristen what happened, and she was like dropped on the floor, like, what? She was just like, what? I cannot believe this. She was like, this is an amazing story. I have to tell my friend who's a podcast producer. So she introduced me to Brianna, who had worked on a few podcasts that had done very well, that she did some stories that got picked up by NPR and This American Life. And and so Kristen gave her my story, and she thought, I think there's something there. I'm working on a series, and I think this story will fit in really well. So I got to do this podcast with Brianna Breen, and she told my story in the most beautiful way. She interviewed Jean-Michel, she interviewed Mike Vanny, she even interviewed David Clark, all these people who helped so much in this journey. So TEDx is a branch of the TED Talks, and they're organized by people in cities, and they're sponsored by TED or something. Anyway, so the sponsor of Brianna Breen's podcast, which my story was a part of, was also sponsoring this TEDx event in San Francisco.
Got it.
So they had a mutual sponsor, and the sponsor heard the podcast of my story. This was honestly maybe 2 weeks before the TEDx event. And they thought, oh my God, like we have all our speakers lined up and everything already, but like we have to have this guy, like this story is amazing. Maybe he can play cello. So 2 weeks before the TEDx event, I got the call from the sponsor, and they said, hey, we'd love to have you. We only have 5 minutes. Can you do something?
Oh my God. Can you tell the story in 5 minutes? Yeah.
Can you tell the story in 5 minutes? And I was like, oh my God. So let's talk about like feeling all the feelings again. Oh, I was so nervous actually. So I thought I'd love to tell the story through music somehow, but talking in 5 minutes, very hard.
Yeah.
Nothing. It goes by like that. So I was trying to find a piece of music that I thought could interact with my story in a good way. And they let me go on that stage and play a little cello and tell my story in about 5 minutes. And it was an amazing experience.
Yeah.
It was really cool to walk out. They play like the TED sound, and you're on the red dot, and the big TEDx letters were there. Yeah. Another reason I'm very lucky to live in San Francisco. Some TEDx events are done in like a cafe or like at a university, but this was done at Herbst Theater in San Francisco, which is like my favorite hall. It's gorgeous. It's intimate and small, and it has these beautiful murals. It's beautiful. And so I got to do that at Herbst Theater, which was an amazing experience.
Yeah. No, but that's incredible. Thank you for sharing that story again, because it's so heartwarming, and that it's a happy ending from a very deep hill conflict when you think about 125K from nothing, from recent graduate cellist working at a cafe, Right. It's incredible. It's an incredible story.
Right. Well, thank you. Yeah. Thanks for letting me share that today.
Yeah. So what are you doing with the cello now, Matt?
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, we're like what, a year into the pandemic, and it's been really hard for so many people. I think I've been really lucky to keep teaching. So what I decided I wanted to sort of dedicate myself to in the extra time I had in the pandemic was making these videos. So I think Patty and I share the same passion, probably, of like arranging.
Yes.
I love arranging, and I love, speaking of like Beyonce earlier, like Beyonce has made me want to arrange her entire albums.
Yes.
Like I wanted to do like a whole Beyonce album on cello, like just, so it's mostly pop songs. I'll fall in love with a song. When I get into a song, I tend to get obsessed with it.
Yeah.
And then
I think this is where the arranging comes out.
Yes, totally. Because like I learned the only way I can like get out of the obsession is if I like play it on cello somehow. I think in the obsession, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to feel the song as deeply as I can. Like I'll sing it, but it doesn't give me the same expression. But as soon as I can play it on cello, I feel like, oh, the song has come through me now, and now I can let it go. And in the cello quartet, we did a lot of arranging of pop songs, so I sort of have that background as well. So I thought, well, I can't do it with other people, so I'll figure it out here. So I made some arrangements of some songs, and honestly, the first ones are horrible. And I've been working on this for a few years, but I think in the pandemic, I sort of could really dive in and focus on this. And so I had a couple in the archive that I was like, all right, I think with some tweaking, I can publish them. And so I've been working on these arrangements. I take a pop song I get into, I arrange it I try to keep it to 4 or 5 cellos. And then at home, I record all the parts. And then I've been having my hand at some videography.
Do you do all the videography yourself?
I do.
Wow, that's really impressive. I didn't realize that. It looks like there's someone else there, but continue. Yeah.
I think San Francisco is so beautiful. So I thought, I want to really show the city in some of these videos. It's been a really fun project. And I think I'd definitely like to make something of it, I think eventually, but it's just been fun to get better at recording and to get better at my arranging, and also to learn how to edit videos and how to film. And
yeah, they're wonderful videos. I mean, I think it's well done. They look great. So I'm excited to keep watching whatever you produce and keep creating content, and obviously keep creating cello quartets, because, the world needs more cello quartets and quintets.
Yes, absolutely.
Are you ready to take a break?
Sure.
Okay, we'll be right back. Welcome back from the break. So, Matt, you wanted to talk about your experiences and discoveries in mindfulness and meditation, and how that was actually a life-transforming practice for you. What made you go into this realm of mindfulness? Sorry.
The mindfulness realm. I like that. I think I'm going to start calling it that. It's nice. Well, really, I think what happened was I had a really challenging breakup, and I was in a relationship, a very short relationship, but thank you. And I think we all go through those, right?
Yeah.
But there's some of them, this one in particular, like really rattled me to my core.
Yeah.
And like the breakup really got to me, and it was just very challenging for me. So it really brought up all that stuff about like worthiness and like, oh my God, it really shook up my identity, my sense of self, and all of this. So it really went to my core in a way. And I really felt lost kind of in life. Like I really sort of felt like, I felt like depressed, and I felt like extremely anxious. My anxiety was through the roof, to the point where I couldn't really function. Like I was powering through everything.
Yeah.
And that was really hard. And so
sorry.
Thankfully, I was able to find a therapist, and an amazing therapist. Yeah, I had like the worst health insurance at the time. And like I found this amazing therapist. He was amazing. So he was helping me a lot. And in the waiting room, before one of my sessions once, there was a magazine all about mindfulness meditation. And I feel like I just happened to see it at the right time. And whatever it said just clicked with me right away. It was like, oh my God, that's what I need to do. Like that's where I'm going to find healing. Also through therapy, which I'm a huge proponent of.
Yes.
So I think I started meditating. My sister sent me this link to an Oprah and Deepak 21-day meditation experience. And it was like I had to download the app, and every day they came out with these new meditations. They were 20-minute long. And that was where I started to practice mindfulness and actually sit down and do it. But I had to do it because I was desperate. Therapy was helping a lot, and it helped so much in so many ways. But I had to figure out a new way how to deal with what I was going through, because I tried to think my way through the problem. I tried to ignore it. I tried to talk about it. And the only thing that I found to do was meditate. And that's what helped me. So I started with that. And then I think after that 21-day meditation experience, I had such a profound transformation just from that, that I think it was a similar thing where it just felt like the timing was right. And I was hungry for it. I was desperate for it. And I was ready. I was open to it. I mean, now meditation is pretty mainstream. And this wasn't even that long ago, but it really became like a rock for me. And even after like I got through sort of like the hurt of the breakup, I think the anxiety persisted, and the anxiety became this like daily struggle.
You were experiencing trauma, right? So even if you can think your way out, or you can rationalize and put logic to it and say, well, clearly this X, Y, and Z was the reasons why, that's still an emotional response. And you can't treat emotional responses the same as a rational response, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah. So I mean, to me, that like totally makes sense why meditation was one path for that kind of cure of your anxiety, because I think that was residual from the trauma that your body experienced from that emotional breakup.
Because I think in the meditation, the surprising thing to me was how embodied meditation is. Like one of the things I remember being told was like a body scan meditation even is a good example. Just like closing your eyes and mentally scanning up your whole body and just sensing where there's tension and ease, or like comfort and discomfort in your body. And even just connecting to that, it's like, whoa. I remember I would scan from my head down, and I would get to my sort of like my stomach area, and there would just be like a block. It would just
weird.
The scan would stop. I couldn't get past that.
Yeah.
And I could skip that and then continue on down through my legs. But there was like something there.
A knot in your stomach. Yeah.
A knot in my stomach. And so it was the embodiment. And I think it struck me one night because I had filled literally notebooks full of journaling. I was trying to journal my way out of the pain. And it struck me once when I finished the end of a second notebook and I realized that nothing had changed. Like I didn't feel any better.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that was probably the lowest moment. And that's when I realized that I couldn't keep thinking my way through it. And so I realized I needed a new strategy. And I think so meditation sort of came into my life right then. And so first meditation was a strategy for dealing with emotional distress and anxiety. And I kept going with it. And I started getting so into meditation where I was like, I really wanted to buy like a nice meditation cushion and all this stuff. So I thought, okay, well, I'll keep a log. And when I've meditated for 30 days in a row, I'll buy like a meditation bell. And then after 60 days, I'll get like a cushion. So it was sort of like this thing because I knew it was good for me. So I had to keep doing it. And eventually I found myself at meditation groups that I was going to every week, 2 or 3 times a week. I would wake up at 5 a.m. and drive to the Zen Center in San Francisco because they have open meditation at 5:25 in the morning.
Wow.
And so I started going and I went to some meditation retreats, which were really amazing experiences. And finally the anxiety got to a point where I didn't feel like it was running my life anymore. But
that's great.
Which was amazing. Actually, I still remember the first morning waking up after all this turmoil of the breakup and all this stuff. For the first morning, waking up not feeling anxious. And it was
what a blessing. Yeah.
Like freedom. Oh my gosh. And
yes.
And then, like an hour later it came up or whatever. But it was a start.
Yes, right.
It was like that glimmer of like hope, sort of like I needed to see. And so then my relationship to meditation changed from like an anxiety management system to just more about deeper meditation, like experiencing the present moment. And that was sort of what I think every time I meditated, I learned more about what that meant. In one way, we can all sort of agree like, oh, be present. Don't worry about the past. Don't worry about the future. But in practice, I think it's, at least for me, it's very difficult. So every time I meditated, I felt like I learned more about what being present meant. And then I think at some points in time, I started to experience sort of like a flow state where your glimmer of presence, like full presence, when you're completely present, started to grow a little bit longer. And instead of like a 1 second thing, it started to become like a minute long, like where I could sort of sustain this state of being fully present for longer periods of time. And I realized that that's how I felt in music. And not every concert feels that way, and not every time we practice feels that way, but sometimes we have these moments where, like that we've talked about, these sort of, if you will, like spiritual moments, or these things that feel, like you said earlier, where like the moment lifts up, and where you feel like in a flow state, and you, for me, I think in some of those moments, like you lose your perception of time a little bit, and in a good way, and like you are timeless, which can be so beautiful about music. There's a great quote, and I'm going to misquote it probably, and you probably know it. It's we decorate space with visual art. We decorate time with music.
Yes, that's a great quote. Yeah.
Something, and I'm
Yeah,
misquoting
something
it,
like
but
that. Something like that. Yeah.
something like that. It's like time is decorated with music. And it's so true because it's like a concert is a live experience. That note comes and goes.
Yes.
And that's the same in mindfulness is we're instructed to let the clouds go by and stay grounded in whatever you're grounding. And maybe you're focusing on your breath, and breath comes and goes too. So that's why, so like a lot of times if you start to learn to meditate, they'll say, oh, focus on your breathing. That's because it changes every time. Every breath is different. It comes and goes. You can't hold on to your breath. You have to take in a new breath. You have to let that breath go. It's a great way to stay connected to something that's more present, that's like happening in real time. And so I think I started to take that experience of meditation, of these moments of like real mindfulness and like kind of that flow feeling, and feel it connected to music as well. It's a fantasy for me, at least, to try to experience that all the time in music and meditation. Like most of the times when I sit down to meditate, you know, it's a mess. It's a storm of like thoughts and feelings and like to-do lists. And I'm like,
should you be doing meditation right now when you have so much to do, like that kind of thought?
Yeah.
Okay.
Even just like, I'll get totally lost in thought and think about like that stupid thing I told someone yesterday. And I'm like, why did I tell them that? You know, or like remembering something funny I saw and I start laughing. I'm like, whoa. But that's that. And I think the mind is actually meant to do that. The mind is built to wander. There's that story about Albert Einstein that he like discovered relativity once he left his lab and went for a walk.
Right.
And I think that demonstrates like we do really well with focused stuff. And then when we let the mind wander, it can connect all these things. So meditation has been less about only being present, but about letting that happen, but bringing it back, keep coming back to the present moment. That's what they always say. Come back to the present moment. Come back. I'm like, okay. So, but it's very hard. So most of the time it's not this like amazing flow state that you get into, but you called it a practice, which is exactly what it is. And in that sense too, it's just like music. Like sometimes you pick up your cello and you feel like a rock star, and sometimes you pick it up and you feel like you can't play at all. At least I don't know. That's how I feel.
Yes, no, I feel that way. Like, yeah.
It's a daily thing and it's a practice, and it's the same with cello. And so I think that's why I started connecting them, because it felt like if I can really stay present with what I'm doing on the cello and connected to what I'm doing on the cello, then that trauma of missing that note in that concert that one time doesn't have to get brought up, because that's actually not what's happening right now. Like what's really happening is me just playing this note.
Oh, this is wonderful. Sorry.
And so
this is helpful for me too to remember.
And it's amazing like how many thoughts can happen in your head in one note. You can remember your trauma, you can remember to be present, you can like remember another time when you missed the note, and you can convince yourself of it all within like an eighth note. You know, it's quarter notes, like whoa. So I think in that ways, it's helped me to stay present. I think it's helped me to trust myself in playing more, because we've all trained so much. Like you absolutely know where that note is.
Right.
And then it's just like our fear and like, well, I don't want to mess up. Well, what will they think if I mess up? Then that can spiral. So then if you're playing, I remember playing the fourth Bach prelude once from memory at the conservatory. Somehow I got lost and I got caught up on some note that I'd messed up, right? So I was still like stuck on this note in my head, but somehow my fingers kept going, and I don't even know if I played all the right notes, but they kept going.
Yeah.
And then I like came back to the present moment. I was like, holy crap, I'm still playing? Okay, like keep going. Like I don't even know what happened.
Yeah.
How long have I been gone? Like
right.
So I don't know. That happened. So yeah, I think just not idealizing the flow state so much, but just realizing that I can try to be present with my playing as much as possible.
This is a question that's been floating in my head, because I love this idea of what you say, that the mind is built to wander. Do you think meditation, it's more like it's tracking rather than disciplining to go to that present state? It's more that you're training yourself to recognize the wandering to the present, wandering back.
That's such a great word. Tracking is so good, because it's really about building awareness of what's happening in the moment. And like in the moment, your mind wandered and then you brought it back. And so, so it's all about tracking. And so there was a great tool that I learned from a teacher that said to just name what happened and just like label what happened. Sometimes you'll hear people say like, oh, just don't be judgmental. Like, but I think what that means is, so you go, oh, my mind wandered. And then you just come back to the present moment. Oh, wandering mind. Okay, here we go. Here we go. Here we're back. Oh, anxious mind. Oh, here we go. We're back here. Oh, angry mind, or like whatever. All these things. I find that really helpful. Like I remember at first meditating, I would be worried. I would think of something. I was like, oh, I got to get milk at the grocery store.
Sure.
While I'm meditating, right? Oh, I got to get milk at the grocery store. And then I would be worried that I would forget that I needed milk. So then I would like stop meditating and go write it down, and then like come back. And then so later on, it's just like, oh, like that's the to-do list mind. Okay, I'm just gonna let that go. And that's hard. I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna forget everything.
But you don't really right? Do you?
But you don't. The weird thing is like the wandering is great because our minds are meant to do that in a way. Like downtime is sort of like when we can let our mind do that. But what's surprising, I think, to me is that I'll speak from my own personal experience. When I've disciplined my mind, just in any meditation experience, even with that, you're still able to have thoughts and insights and deep insights to things. The surprising thing to me was that the more disciplined my mind became, the more profound the insights that came from that were.
Okay.
And initially, I would have thought that the insights would have come from the wandering. But in fact, they came from when I was absolutely present and like absolutely connected. And I think at first, I was really afraid to let go of the wandering mind because it felt like if I let go of that, I was like losing something. I was losing creativity or like who I was or, and in fact, the opposite I found was true, that the more I could be present, the more all of those things were real. The more I felt myself, the more I felt creative, the more connected I felt to my like emotions. And that was very encouraging because it was just like, yeah, this is really helping me be more of who I am. Even though I'm just sitting here like, okay, counting my breaths, like 1, in, out, or whatever it is.
Yeah. So, I mean, that makes so much sense to me why meditation and mindfulness was your way out of that really troubling heartbreak. And from anyone who's ever experienced something at some level that you did, I reaching out and saying, I'm sorry that you had to go through that.
I know.
But the silver lining, is that you did discover this for yourself. And is it something that you continue to do today? Is it a practice that you've continued?
So I think it's like, it's...
Should I even put you on the spot? I'm sorry.
It is. I do find it is very hard to keep the routine. The more I'm doing it, the easier it is to sort of jump back in. But right now, I haven't been very regular with it.
But that's okay. I mean, in the way, it's something that you've discovered a lot about yourself, that it's there and it's not a necessity that it was once before, where you really didn't know your identity as well as you do now. Right. Yeah. So I think that to me is, I'm forgiving you or whatever. I mean, not even that's even not really the right word to use, but
Yeah. And I think, I mean, at the time, like at least in that breakup, it was literally a lifeline. Mm-hmm. Like I had to meditate. That was the only thing that could bring my anxiety down enough so that I could like deal with life and then with the hurt of the breakup. And so it was out of necessity. And now it's like, then it transformed. It was less about managing anxiety. And so now I'll recognize moments of mindfulness and presence all the time. I have a new student. I think she's 9 or 10 years old, brand new to cello. And just last week or 2 weeks ago, she was able to put her second finger down and play F natural. And she plucked the note and it like rang out. And it was beautiful. And she sort of went, oh, wow. Like she was so in awe of that sound.
Yeah.
And for me, that was like a moment of presence. That was a moment of mindfulness, of having awe at something that's simple.
Yeah.
And that like we probably take for granted that our F rings. Like, but for her, that was the first time she's ever played that note. So I think what I carry from it now is, and I do still meditate sometimes. Mm-hmm. I'll notice moments of mindfulness, or at least I try to be more mindful all the time, just going through the day. Like I don't like washing dishes, and I don't have a dishwasher, Patty. Oh my God. Next apartment, I am getting a dishwasher. I tell you, I am tired of washing dishes. But so that's my mindfulness. Like sometimes I wash dishes and I'm like angry. I'm like whose dish is this? And it turns out it's mine.
Mine.
Then, so I can have all of this crap going on about like getting mad, and then I break the dish, whatever. And so, or I can say, okay, I'm just gonna chill out and just be mindful. It doesn't have to be any big deal. Mm-hmm. It's no big deal. It's just I'm just gonna like do this right now. I'm just gonna wash this dish. And then you can like, if you really want to make a meditation of it, you can like listen to the sound of the water, or like feel the sponge in your hand, or like feel the texture of the dish that you're washing or something. But yeah, so it's like in moments of that,
right, that you can even find levels of meditation in other actions and activities that either you do enjoy a lot, like playing cello, or what you don't really like to do, which is wash dishes. Right. Which is translatable to all of us. I think all of us can do that.
Absolutely. One time someone said to me like, oh, running is my meditation. And I thought, okay, like, yeah, totally. And I think at first I was like, no, it's not really meditation. And I really grew to learn like, yes, of course, if it's your meditation for you, then it is. I think really it's about like whatever we can experience this presence with. And like I feel like we're lucky because we get to play music, and we probably have these moments of presence and like connection and flow and stuff. And So we get to feel that. And I think whatever you can do that gets you to feel that way is great.
Right.
But yeah, I definitely feel that both cello and meditation sort of inspire each other in a way. Because then I'll think of it like on cello, I'm like, oh, it's just about listening to the sound. Like when you're really listening to the sound, it's kind of just like presence. And then I take that into meditation and I think about that. So they sort of feed off each other.
Yeah.
But I do remember one of the meditation retreats I went to, it was like a 10-day silent meditation retreat. And if anyone is ever interested in meditation and they're doing it, like I cannot recommend retreats more. They are amazing experiences. But towards the end, we were experimenting with different things to use to ground you to the present moment. So a huge one that we were talking about is like embodying things, which was sort of what meditation helped you with. So like feel your breath, like, focus on your breathing. If you have a pain in your knee, like focus on that, like use that to anchor you in the present moment. And then we started using like sound. And the description the teacher gave was let the sound come into your ear and just sit inside your ear.
Ooh.
And like something about that just helped me sort of receive the sound.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't like an active, like, oh, I'm listening. It was like I'm receiving, like the sound was coming to my ears. And that helped me on cello.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like that really helps me just like hear the notes that are coming out of the cello. I don't know.
I love
anyway,
that so much. Because I feel like that is, we so easily hear things. We so easily, as you say, actively pursue listening. But I feel like those are two extremes of what listening actually is. And that what your teacher was saying.
Meditation teacher. So.
Saying somewhere in the middle. It's something that you actively are receiving, as you're saying, but then also letting it kind of sit and let you ponder it. And I think that's wonderful. And something that we don't talk about a lot, you know?
Yeah, I know. It's hard to put in words sometimes. And I think it's one of those things that sometimes you have to have like a felt experience of it for then like when you hear someone say it, you're like, oh yeah, I do know what that feels like. And now I can understand it. And I've had the same experience. It's like playing cello. It's like, right, like of course you hear yourself, but I think I had some moment once where I was like, I'm not actually listening to I'm like not really hearing what's coming out of my cello. I'm just kind of going through the motions or whatever. And it's the same thing with resisting reality. So like that's one of the things about being present is that there's a constant battle to not resist what's actually happening. That's why I was going off and trying to solve my breakup problems through thinking. Because I wasn't really just touching into what I was really feeling in that moment. And maybe that's like a strategy of my own. But like resisting the moment is when, if I'm driving somewhere and there's traffic and I'm like, and I'm angry, I'm resisting the reality that there is traffic.
Right.
So like there is traffic, there's nothing I can do about it. So I can either get all pissed off or I can like deal with the reality.
Right.
And be like, all right, okay, deep breath. I have to call the person, tell them I'm going to be late. And so the reality is that there's traffic and there's nothing I can do about it. I feel like it's similar with cello. It's like, what is the reality of my sound actually?
No, I get that. No, totally. And that's, I think, also really helpful for us to think about if we do practice and when we do practice meditation even too, because it's bringing that level of mindfulness to very everyday annoyances like that.
Yeah.
And how much that can really change how we behave given a certain reality, as you call it, a certain circumstance that is happening. Because a lot of times people say you can't change what's happening, but you can change how you react to it. Yeah.
Totally. And that's exactly it. Yeah. You can change your response to what is happening in reality. And I think for me, training my mind sort of in a more disciplined way with meditation was really important to then be able to sort of feel like I can kind of have these moments of mindfulness. And a lot of people have them just already. For me, I found like training my mind in a very specific kind of rigorous way, like through these meditation retreats and with all of these like books. Oh my God, I bought so many. But I was reading all these books and watching all these meditation courses and stuff. And so I think going at it rigorously sort of in that way was just like cello, like we train very intensely, but I think that really helped me sort of learn how to meditate. And I think that was very valuable. I think I wouldn't have as many moments or experiences of presence and mindfulness without that sort of training. But I think that the mindfulness can take any form in people's life. Yeah. So I love it. So, and with my students, I'll say, hey, let's do a scale meditation, or like play a C major scale and like do like a body scan. So like, I'll be like, okay, feel your feet. And then on the up bow, it's like, okay, feel your knees. And then on the down bow, feel your hips and like relax your shoulder. Like, and it's great to.
Wow. I feel like I need to do that. Can I join? I want to do that too.
Yeah. I'm sure my students are like, what the heck is going on? But they're like 10, but anyway.
But then they will understand later. So
I hope so. We hope so. I know. Yeah.
So can I ask you 2 final questions?
Yes. Oh, I'm excited what they are.
Okay. What is one piece of advice you would tell tell your younger self about entering and pursuing a music career?
Wow. That's such a good question. I mean, with you as well, I think with all of us, like music has taken us so many places that would have never dreamed that I could go to. Like where I grew up in Reno, and I mean, like I'm white, my parents were married growing up, like I'm gay, but like it was quite easy to come out and like, so, you know, but I think I grew up in a place where people didn't do things like become a cellist. And so that was very contrary to like where I came from.
I see.
I grew up outside of Reno. It was very rural, very conservative. So I think it's amazing. I think my piece of advice for my younger self would be to work just as hard, but to try to enjoy life a little bit more along the way.
Yes. I could have used that advice.
Especially towards the end of conservatory, I was like, I'm just going to practice all day long. It doesn't matter. Nothing else matters. I'm just going to practice. And I remember hearing a singer in my French class tell us, because we all had to tell stories in French, and she was telling a story of how she walked across the Golden Gate Bridge that weekend. Mm-hmm. And that struck me because I was like, whoa, I stayed at home and practiced all weekend, and like, which to me at the time was my highest value. But I think my life would have been much fuller. I think I would have been a little happier if I had sort of given myself permission to step away from the cello at times and go outside and cultivate my friendships more and enjoy this beautiful city and just have fun. So work hard, absolutely, like work your butt off, but have fun along the way too.
Yeah, great advice. And my second question, as we enter a post-pandemic world, what elements of your musical pandemic life would you want to continue and what would you want to shed?
I definitely want to continue making videos.
Yes, I was going to say probably that.
Yeah, I'm having so much fun doing it. It's really fun. So I want to keep making them. I want to keep getting better. I don't know what I would shed necessarily rather than what I might bring in more of. I think I would really just bring in more chamber music of playing with other people.
Oh,
like knowing how, like I miss that. Yeah. I really do miss. And to be honest, I didn't miss it at first.
Okay.
At first, I didn't miss it. It took me 6 months to really start to like crave that again. And yeah, I miss that. And I think it's influenced so much of me as a cellist, having variety of teaching. I love teaching. I think maybe I would balance my time between teaching and chamber music more.
Yeah, chamber music's awesome. So
yeah.
Are there any platforms or websites for listeners to learn more about you or any upcoming projects?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm always working on a new video. I'm just finishing up the recording for a new song that I'm working on, and I'm getting ideas of where I want to film. I post a lot on Instagram. So I post all my new videos and songs on Instagram, but I also always post them on YouTube. So my handle is lemoncello.wow.
Nice.
I can thank Sarah Bonomo for helping with me with that name.
Oh, I see. Nice. Yeah. Shout out to Sarah.
Yeah. I have a website. It's mjlcello.com.
Okay, and if you enjoyed listening, be sure to smash that subscribe button wherever you're tuning in to this podcast. Leave a review on Apple Podcasts while you're at it. It doesn't need to be long. Your review will help others search for the podcast because of the crazy algorithms, and you'll make Sushi's day. And it's free. Make sure to share this podcast with your friends and family as well. If you want to level up, you can always become part of the Haydn Behind the Music Stand family by donating what you will on our Patreon page at patreon.com/Haydn Music Stand. Our social media handle for Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter is at Haydn Music Stand, and we'd love to hear from you at our email haydnmusicstand@gmail.com. Didn't recognize a piece we discussed during the episode? No worries. There's a Spotify playlist with all the music discussed for your convenience. The link is in the description of each episode. Matt, thank you so much for being here. I'm giving you a huge hug.
Oh,
virtually
Patty,
from far away.
This was so fun. I'm so glad I did this. This was great. Thank you for having me on your show today.
No, of course. Again, as I say, looking forward to all your videos and stuff.
Thank you.
Cello Quartet Power forever.
Cello Quartet Power. Oh, my other favorite cello pun is it's going to be a celebration.
Oh, that's a good one.
That's my favorite word.
It will certainly be a celebration.
Yes. I love your podcast, what you're doing. Everything sounds so good, and you're doing an amazing job. This was so easy to talk to you today.
Oh, thank you.
I feel like my story will be told in a good way.
And thanks for listening. Say bye, Sushi. And I just thought that was, I mean, I might cut this, but I felt like what you just said was such a John Michelism of like, if you just listen, it just brought me back to like his teaching. But
one of those things that like makes you angry when you first hear it. I'm like, oh,
what does that mean?
Why is he saying that? What does that mean? And then like I'm like, oh, he's kind of right.
He's right.